Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of Filming the Wild. Today is pretty exciting because I'm talking to you guys about a brand new lens from Sigma. It's the Sigma 60-600 DGDN f4.5 to 6.3 lens that is specifically designed for mirrorless cameras like the Sony A7s III. And it's the only one out there on the market like this. It's the only 10 by zoom lens that you can get for a mirrorless body like this, and it's absolutely incredible. I just want to say thank you to Sigma for sending me this loaner. I've been out testing it in the field out in Yellowstone in negative 20-degree temperatures. This lens is fantastic. Again, like I said, it's the only one on the market currently that's a 10 by zoom with a 60-600 reach for mirrorless, and it's truly phenomenal. There's a lot of things that Sigma has taken from their original one and has incorporated into this, plus some new features as well that we're going to talk about. But first of all, just want to say I am not sponsored by any way by Sigma. This is a completely non-biased viewpoint. This is completely my take on how I like the lens, how I thought it performed. Anyways, with that said, if you like this kind of video, looking for more tutorials behind the scenes about what it takes to make wildlife films and wildlife documentaries, this channel, Filming the Wild, is all about the behind the scenes moments, about what goes on when you go produce wildlife documentaries and films. So if you are interested in that thing, please be sure to subscribe to this channel, give this video a thumbs up, and leave me a comment in the comment section below. Tell me what you think would be cool being able to work with a lens like this. If you guys have used the other ones, I'd love to hear your thoughts, inputs, and feedback on this review. So without further ado, let's get into that intro.
My name is Alan Lacey, and I'm a wildlife filmmaker, cameraman, and producer. Adventure with me as I explore the amazing world of nature and show you what it's like filming the wild.
All right, welcome back. And again, we're talking about Sigma's brand new 60-600 for mirrorless bodies. I've paired it with the Sony A7s III. It's my go-to trusty camera. It's fantastic for video. It's pretty amazing what it's capable of doing. And like I said, for the last year and a half, 2 years now, I've been working with the 60-600 for Canon mount. So I have to adapt it with the MC11 adapter. And it's a really great lens. I really like using it. But recently, Sigma reached out and wanted me to give this one a run through and see what I thought of it, especially for the filmmaking side of things. Since that's what I focus on, doing video primarily, that's what this little video review is about, is how the video capabilities of this lens works with the mirrorless body. So it's pretty cool what they've been able to do in this lens. They've incorporated a couple brand new features. Just a quick little run through about the lens itself. The overall build quality is pretty awesome. It does feel like a lens might be just a little, yep. It does feel slightly lighter than the original. The original has a good weight to it as well. But this one, I think it comes in at it's either 5.5 or 4.5 pounds. So it's still pretty hefty, but the overall build quality is really solid. Now it's weather sealed, so taking it out into the elements, all of the critical components like the mount, the zoom places where moisture can get in as you zoom in and out, plus all of the little buttons and features, and all your zoom and focus points are all pretty weather sealed. The same with all their buttons and functions. So it's really good quality to get out there and put it to the test, whether it's raining or snowing. We got a lot of snow when we were out there. The lens performed flawlessly. A couple other things I've noticed about the lens that's a little bit different than the other is you actually have a few extra little portions where you have some actual programmable, customizable buttons that you can use for focus, or other areas that if you want to, however you want to set up your lens. If you have like half focus points, or if you want to focus towards infinity, there's a couple different features you have here. Another really cool feature about this lens that they've integrated something new is their, I think it's called HLA. It's their high response linear actuator focus system. I'll tell you what, when you put the autofocus of the Sony mirrorless cameras into play with this lens, it's fantastic. It's super fast, super responsive. It gets right to your critical focus instantaneously. And I tell you what, compared to the other lens, I mean, the other lens is really good too. It does a really good job communicating through the adapter and the camera body, but overall, this system felt so much more responsive. I was pretty impressed with that. Another thing they have is they've integrated a brand new, I think, algorithm for their image stabilization. So for your optical stabilization in camera, you can make sure that's all set up properly, but then with the lens itself, it has, I believe, 6 stops of image stabilization at the long end at 600 millimeters, and at the 60 millimeter end, it's got 7 stops of image stabilization. which is fantastic. So if you're hand holding anything with this lens, the actual stabilization is really quite amazing. Now, most of the stuff I've been doing is on a tripod, so didn't get to put that to the test fully, but the little bit that I did test with it, it was pretty impressive. It's got basically 2 programmed optical stabilization parts. Number 1 basically is your pretty much standard, however you're moving through the lens, however your normal motion is, it stabilizes the image really well. But if you're going to be doing a lot of quick panning, their second image stabilization mode is designed more for the quick pan. So for sports, high action, like motorsports or stuff like that, or for filming quick moving birds or wildlife subjects, that would be another really great feature to have and use as well. But overall, the quality of this build is pretty impressive. Now, one thing that is different in comparison between these two, they're mostly the same, pretty close to the same heights. The mirrorless one just stands slightly longer, not much difference, but overall, pretty close to the same. Now the collars and the tripod mounts, obviously you can tell are different. This is the original Canon mount. It has a longer shoe here that you can put on. It's the Swiss Arca plate. This one also as well has the same thing. It's just shorter, a little less room to be connected on to your tripod, which, for balancing, honestly, the new one might become an issue because there's only a little bit here. If you're going to mount this onto a gimbal with your camera, there's only a little bit where you're able to play moving it back or forth to be able to get that balance point, which, it's still pretty, for the most part, it feels relatively balanced. However, with this, you have a little more room. Now for video work like I do, that really doesn't matter because I connect all of this to a base plate with a rail system, so that really doesn't come into play too much, but yeah, I balance it differently that way. But overall, it's still pretty good. Another little feature you'll notice that's different is on the original, there is actually known spots here. Let me just look at it. Yep, right here where you can have actual focus to infinity, or you can move it all the way to the near, and you can actually see your measurements for your focal lengths. Whereas this new one is designed more for the fly-by-wire focusing systems that the autofocus systems have for the Sony mirrorless cameras, but you don't see that on here. So it's more intuitive to how you focus on your, the quicker you focus or the slower you focus determines how quick it moves through the focal plane, the actual distance itself. And we'll get more into that in a little bit too, but overall, that's pretty much the same setup. Also, you can lock the lens down at various things. That the zoom lock is pretty nice. You can pretty much at every point along the zoom range that has a mark, you can actually lock, and it stays good. I'm not sure if I've never tested that with this one. Let's see if it does it do the same at each point. We got it at 100 here, and let's give that a shot. Yep, same thing. Cool. So yeah, those are the same. But yeah, overall, I'd say the build quality is extremely sturdy. There's, for the most part, they've kind of redesigned the lens, and it's just, I really enjoyed working with it. I'll just say that much. Another really cool feature about this new lens is that when you get out to the 200 millimeter distance on this lens, it actually acts pretty much like a macro lens. You can get some really awesome macro shots with this lens at 200 millimeters. And what's pretty fantastic about it is you can pretty much put whatever you're filming almost into the lens hood itself. That's how close you can get to your subject. It's pretty phenomenal. And then it gets some pretty amazing macro shots with that 200 mil. I didn't do a whole lot of that in the filming, but I did test it out with the camera a little bit in terms of stills, and it was really, really cool to work with it. And it's neat to have such a versatile lens that is able to do macro shots as well. Now, something else about this lens that I rather like is the same way they incorporated on the original is as you move through the zoom range, you can either use the actual zoom function this way, or you can actually use the push-pull on the collar here and be able to zoom through that range. And overall speaking, it feels so much more smooth to me, being able to move through the zoom range with this lens. There's not as much resistance, which I like, so you're able to move in and out through that zoom range to be able to utilize the capability of this lens. Whereas the original, yeah, it's a little more stiff. Now that could be, maybe it's just a little older and maybe I've got some dust and such that's kind of built up inside, but this is a little more rigid to be able to move through that zone, which, you know, it's not a bad thing. It's just something to get used to. But the newer lens moves so much quicker, and it just feels smoother. All right, so now the main thing about this lens that is fantastic, obviously, is that it pairs with the Sony mirrorless cameras. They also have it for the Leica mount as well too, the L mount. But for the E mount with Sony, it's really amazing. The lens and the camera, they communicate extremely well. I'm really impressed that how Sigma was able to work through this and be able to like just nail the autofocus system on this. I mean, it is so quick, it is so responsive, which really shines when you pair it with the Sony's autofocus systems. Now in video, I mainly do all of my stuff manually because I just have a lot more control over how quick and how slow, how fast I want to be able to focus through the focus ranges that I'm working on. You know, when you use the autofocus system on these cameras, sometimes it just makes you think, why do I even use manual focus anymore? Because they are so good. Yeah, I really just can't, I said this so many times already, I just really can't get over how quick and how responsive the two work together as compared to the original 60-600. So I just want to say kudos to Sigma for being able to nail that. And it really, the whole functionality of the camera and compared to with that, it's just fantastic. Now another aspect is the image quality of the lens itself. The original had fantastic, superb quality, and this is no slouch either. I honestly think that the quality of the image in the footage that I'm getting is actually slightly better than the original. It just feels like there's just a little more clarity, a little more sharpness perhaps. And a big thing for me is at the wide angle lens, at the 60mm area, there really is not a lot of chromatic aberration that I've been seeing at all. Honestly haven't seen any yet. I've tested it a little bit to see, and I can't seem to find that. I've heard some people mention that they might have a little bit of ghosting, but I have not noticed that either. So far, throughout the whole range, this lens is extremely tack sharp. I think perhaps in stills, when you really break things down, you might notice some things, but in video, as you're moving and your subjects are moving, it's harder to notice. But it's just overall the image from 60 all the way to 600, I think it's probably, you know, just kind of like the other one, when you're around that 400mm mark, it does seem to have really good, strong clarity there, and I've noticed that it really seemed really sharp. But I don't notice much of a difference between that and 600, to be honest. It does seem extremely sharp at 600. Most of the stuff that I was shooting in Yellowstone, I used a lot at 600 just because a lot of the subjects still were quite a ways off, especially with the wolves that we were filming. They never got that close, so being able to have that reach out to 600 was pretty critical. But then for some of the scenics and landscapes, I love to show off the feature on this lens of being able to go wide at 60, and just how much of the landscape that is able to incorporate. It's just pretty impressive. But overall speaking, like, the quality of the images is just superb in this lens. I honestly think that Sigma has probably earned my money. I'll probably be picking one of these up just because of how well it performs with the camera and just the quality of the image as compared to the other one. The other one, like I say, is no slouch either, but it's nice to have something that natively communicates to a camera body instead of having to use through an adapter, because there's always just a tiny little bit lost in there. So overall, like, Sigma, you nailed it. All right, so one of the cons, I think, on this lens, for me personally, is when I get to the manual focus side of things. So as we mentioned a little bit earlier, there's no distances that are on here for the if you were to manual focus, like from infinity to the near. It's just, there's nothing. It's just fly-by-wire is what I call it. I'm not sure what the actual technical term is, but it's designed for the autofocus systems of these cameras, which, like I said earlier, are superb, and that's like an incredible feature to use. But if you want to take more creativity into your hands and you put the extra little ring on here to be able to actually set up a manual focus thing, like kind of like what I have set up here. If you can see, I actually have this little band on. Actually, I'll take it off real quick because I can put it on this lens. Kind of show you what I'm talking about. So when I often film manually, I add these little systems on, which allows me to have a little more precise and precision and control as I am filming with a focus wheel. So one of the challenges on this lens, for me personally, is as you move through the range on your focus point, obviously You can spin this thing around as often as you need to. The quicker you spin this focus wheel, the quicker you focus, the faster it moves through the focal plane. And then the slower you focus, the less distance it travels to the focal plane. I'm not sure if I'm describing. So if you have near to far, if you do a quick motion and you only move maybe let's say an inch, but you move it really quickly for that inch, the distance it travels from your near to far is a really great distance. Now if you move that same inch but just go slow, you're only going to travel just a short distance in the focal plane from your near to far. So on sometimes when I'm shooting, I'm wanting to do a nice rack focus from a subject that's, you know, mediumly out there to, let's say, to an infinity to get a nice shot of the distant mountains or something. What I was noticing is I'd set up my shot, I would have it all set, and then as I'm focusing, I'm getting to the point where this area comes and it stops and it hits, and then I'm not at the full length of my focus that I need to get to. So then I had to back out, go all the way across, all the way to the point where I'd get hit up on this side, and then I'd start again and go slow and just slowly move through my focus range. And then again, I'd hit to that spot and it would get stopped and I wasn't able to get all the way through. I'm not sure if this is making sense. But then I got to the point where I was figuring out, okay, it's based on speed. So then move it through, quickly get to a point where I know I needed focus, and then I was able to move slowly. So there was just some little quirky things like that just took a little bit of adjusting, but I found it kind of frustrating. Not sure if I'm explaining it very well, but basically the faster you move your focal ring, the greater the distance that it will focus or change focus from near to far or far to near, etc. And the slower you move the focus ring, the less distance it travels. So you could move a full 360 degrees on the focus ring extremely fast, and you're going to move throughout near to far in just a short period. And then again, if you do it really slow, it might take you 2 full passes to be able to get the full range of focus. At least that's what it seemed like to me. And that was kind of frustrating. So from a manual focusing perspective, just takes a little bit of adjusting, figuring out how to work with it. And then for me, I just had to back out really fast in order to get out to the near focus and then be able to move in. So a lot of talk on that, but that was pretty much the only thing that really that bothered me and bugged me about the lens, was just the ability to manually use the focus. And again, it's just getting used to the new systems of fly-by-wire. A lot of new mirrorless lenses work that way too. So it's just kind of the way things are moving. So you got to get used to it as a filmmaker. So I don't typically use those lenses, but for the most part, I'd still get this lens though, because it's still pretty fantastic how it works. Now, when it comes to optical stabilization, I talked a little bit about it earlier, but when filming video, often we don't use the stabilization built on the lens, because when you're on a pretty steady platform that's already stable, you don't really need image stabilization. In fact, it kind of creates a weird effect if you're going to do any panning. Sometimes it tries to stabilize an image as you move when you're on tripod from left to right. And so the image will sometimes freeze and all of a sudden move. So it can be kind of awkward and weird. It's not the best. So I often remove and take off image stabilization when I'm filming on tripods. But I thought I'd give it a go because there was some wind and there was definitely some opportunity to see if it would work and how well it worked. So I used it a little bit on the tripod, and I'll be honest, it did okay. Obviously, there were some of those same issues when I would start pans. You can see where it would lag and then catch up and move because it's realizing, oh, we're doing a pan. But overall, and especially in windy days when we had some storms that were moving through, the optical stabilization of the lens worked pretty amazingly, and it really kind of helped cut some of that wind shake, because my tripod's not the most beefy when it comes to helping reduce some of the wind shake, but really worked really well. All right, and probably one of the best features of this lens is the fact that it's such a diverse lens. Sigma kind of designed it to be kind of a one lens, one catch-all kind of thing. And I would agree, honestly, being out there filming in Yellowstone, being able to capture all the wide scenics at 60 millimeters and then being able to go all the way out to 600. I mean, really, truly, you don't need to be changing lenses unless you're needing an ultra wide. But with those landscapes the way they are, I mean, you kind of lose some of the detail when you get anything wider than probably 35 mil, but 60 mil, honestly, I was getting some really awesome scenics too. So this lens really, for any kind of safari, or if you're on travel for wildlife and you want to just, try to reduce the amount of stuff you're taking, this lens would do the trick. It's just fantastic from 60 mil all the way to 600. It's one lens in one complete contained system that allows you that diverse 10 times zoom range. And again, you have it in these other ones, but to be able to be paired and to utilize the systems that Sony has and in the way that this lens does it's fantastic. And again, throughout the whole zoom range, it is extremely sharp. I did not notice, like I said earlier, hardly any, if at all, any chromatic aberration or ghosting with this lens. It's a little bit there. I think I've heard some people mention it in the stills. But the other aspect about this is that 200 millimeter macro. I mean, really everything's contained in this lens is pretty impressive. I think another feature too that's pretty lovely about this lens is the bokeh. So you have some really nice soft fall off when you have a nice subject that is isolated, and in the background the bokeh is really pleasant on the eyes. I think there's like 9 blades or something like that. I can't fully remember. I can put a link or on the video here, but the bokeh is really nice all the way throughout the range from 6600, depending on how you focus. It's really smooth and pleasing on the eyes, and really helps kind of give it that nice cinematic film look, which I like. So if that's important to you, the lens has really good quality with that. All right, so overall, I think this lens is amazing. Sigma, like I said, probably earned my money. I'm probably gonna eventually pick one of these up because, granted, I do like my tried and trusted Canon mount, but I do love the performance of how this pairs with the Sony mirrorless A7s III. The image is amazing, the quality, the sharpness, everything about it, the weather sealing. It's a really, really high quality lens, and it only comes in at, I think, around $2,000. So it's a little bit more than the other, but to me, it's definitely worth it. It's about the same price point as the Sony 200 to 600. And honestly, I've not really used that lens yet, so I can't compare between this one and that one. But I can say between these two lenses that this one definitely outperforms in terms of autofocus, its image stabilization, and just the overall form and functionality of this lens. It just feels much better than the other. The one downside, I think, that to this lens currently, and I'm pretty sure Sigma, at least I hope Sigma is working on it, is there currently are no teleconverters for the Sony E mount, so you're just stuck with 60 to 600. I think the Leica mount, they do have the 1.4 and the 2x teleconverter, so you can get that extra reach. So I really hope that they're working on getting those eventually for Sigma to be able to have those 1.4 and the 2 teleconverter, because having that extra reach with this system would just be incredible, especially if it talks natively with that autofocus system that Sony has, and if it responds well. To me, that'll just blow my mind, because having something that could reach out to 840 or even like 1200 millimeters with decent quality autofocus systems that are still working with this camera, I mean, that would just be insane to me. And especially if it keeps the image quality good. I notice with the teleconverters on my Canon mount, the 1.4 is really good, but 2 is a little soft, and I'm sure I need to program it a little bit because I can probably get in there and calibrate. But there is some weird ghosting on that, especially on the 2x converter. So hopefully they address that when they if they create these for the E mount as well, because for us wildlife filmmakers, or just anyone shooting wildlife in general, having that reach is amazing. So I really hope that you guys are working on that. If you guys do, feel free to send me one of those. I'll test it out. I'd love to put that through the paces too. But yeah, that to me, that's the one current thing that I'm like, I would wish I could have had that, because there were some opportunities in Yellowstone where the 1.4 or even the 2 converter would have been resulted in some pretty awesome shots, I think, especially for the wolves since they're so far away. But overall, this is like your what we often call in the industry as our budget 50 to 1000 lens, because Canon does make a pretty impressive lens that's 50 mil to 1000 mil. It's an insanely expensive, but this is our budget friendly version, and it does a pretty good job. So having those extra teleconverters really puts us in the ballpark to be able to compete with that. So yeah, overall, this lens is amazing. I mean, we were filming in Yellowstone in -20 degree weather. Didn't have any issues at all with the way the lens performed in that cold temperature. Sometimes lenses, I've heard, I've never had this experience, but in cold temperatures, sometimes autofocus systems or just the way the camera has image stabilization can sometimes freak out with cold temps. But this performed flawlessly. It was pretty incredible. So yeah, in cold weathers, I think this lens is the way to go. The snow didn't have any issues with any of the weather mounts and stuff like that, so we never had any moisture at all that came through the lens. So overall, I highly recommend this lens if you're looking at shooting wildlife or filming in wildlife and you have Sony mirrorless or a Leica mount. This lens is probably the top of the line that's currently on the market, especially with such an incredible range from 60 to 600. And again, you know, just want to say thanks to Sigma for loaning me this lens and being able to test it out there in Yellowstone and putting it through its paces. It really was a fantastic experience. Overall, it does have the edge, I believe, on the original. This is my Canon mount. It does, to me, feel like it's just slightly sharper, has better performance out in the field with autofocus, and especially with the newly designed systems of this one for the E mount. I definitely probably will be picking this up in the near future once I have the ability to in my budget. But I love the form and functionality of it. It's just truly the way it just fits on the body. It just honestly just looks so much nicer than having to put a teleconverter on. I mean, that just looks badass. All right, well, that kind of concludes today's video. I hope you liked it. Hopefully you learned something informative. If you're in the market again for a new telephoto lens, I really do recommend Sigma's line because they are superb and absolutely incredible. I've never shot on the Sony's longer 2 to 400 or 2 to 600, so I really can't compare to that. But overall, this lens is it's a fantastic build. It's a fantastic quality, and it's just, yeah, honestly, working with it was amazing. I can't say enough good things about it, obviously. You've probably heard the word fantastic about, I don't know, 40 times in this video by now, and I'm sure you're tired of that word. But anyways, if you like this video, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you think of this lens. Have you worked with the Sigma 60 to 600 in Canon? If you have any questions about it, please leave a comment in the comment section below. And in the meantime, subscribe to this channel if you'd like to learn more about wildlife filmmaking. The whole process is it's a lot of fun to go through, so I've got a lot of videos that kind of walk you through that, as well as some more cool, fun experiences from the field itself. So be sure to subscribe and hit that bell so you're notified of any of my upcoming videos. And if you want to, you can join me over on Patreon, because I'm starting to get a little more involved with showing more in-depth stuff behind the scenes and kind of like engage more with the community. So if it's something you're interested in learning more about, or have personal questions you want to ask about life in general, or what it takes to be a wildlife filmmaker, consider joining my Patreon family. I think it's like $3 to start up, sign up, and then you have access to all of the opportunity to see a little more behind the scenes things. And sometimes I ask questions and engage, like, what should I do next? So if that's something you're interested in, and just being more involved in the Filming the Wild family, would love to have your support over there at Patreon. So check a link in the description below if that's something that interests you. But yeah, in the meantime, keep your eye out for the next episode of Filming the Wild. Got a lot of new awesome content coming down the way this year that I'm excited about, so I look forward to sharing that with you. So anyways, I think I'm done rambling for today's video. Be sure to check out my film on Yellowstone too. That features all the shots, all from this lens.